Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty mind-blowing. We are going to use computational sociology to map out the hidden forces that control our online debates. It's basically giving us X-ray vision for the internet.
You know, we all like to think we're in total control of our digital interactions, but this research asks a really provocative question. Are you actually driving the conversation, or are hidden narratives steering the ship?
At first glance, social media just looks like a giant chaotic mess of noise. But when we apply these computational models, that noise transforms. Suddenly, we can see these hidden, highly structured narrative camps emerge from the chaos.
So to make sense of this, we're going to cover 5 things today. The social media chaos, finding the invisible narratives, identifying the discourse drivers, assessing discourse health, and finally, looking at some real-world case studies.
Okay, let's jump right into part 1, the social media chaos, moving from micro to macro.
Right now, most platforms are completely obsessed with the micro level, like constantly hunting down individual bot accounts. But this research argues that to truly understand online polarization, we urgently need to zoom out. We need a macro lens to figure out if the entire conversation is actually healthy or if it's been hijacked.
Which brings us to part 2, finding the invisible narratives, those hidden currents beneath the surface. The researchers over at the Cognition Web Observatory actually cracked this by using a really clever 3-step model. First, you identify latent narratives using machine learning. Second, you find the key human drivers within those networks. And third, you mathematically measure the interactions between the narratives.
So what exactly do we mean by a narrative here? Well, it's not just a trending hashtag. It is a shared, underlying set of worldviews or beliefs that organically unites a visible cluster of opinions. The algorithm basically churns through millions of posts, and it clusters individual opinions that share the same underlying meaning into these incredibly cohesive narrative camps. It literally makes the invisible visible.
All right, moving to part 3, identifying the discourse drivers. Basically, who's holding the megaphone? The system breaks human behavior down into 3 distinct roles. First up, we have opinion drivers. These are folks who use a very narrow, highly repetitive vocabulary. They are relentlessly trying to pull a topic in one very specific direction.
Next up are the narrative drivers. Think of them as the ultimate influencers, but with a catch. Their massive power really only works inside the echo chamber of their own specific worldview.
And finally, you have the apex tier, discourse drivers. These are usually major media houses or huge celebrities. Their posts are so incredibly prominent that they force fiercely opposing camps to react to them simultaneously.
Now, to find these drivers completely neutrally, the algorithm calculates something called a Don score. It's a formula that cleverly treats human attention as a finite zero-sum resource, which lets us mathematically prove local network influence. On to part 4, assessing the discourse health. Are we looking at a constructive debate or an online mob?
A healthy digital environment usually balances different worldviews. If one narrative completely dominates the space, or if we see massive negative polarity, that's a huge warning sign. And to spot artificially orchestrated campaigns, researchers use what's called the null user method. They essentially compare the actual network behavior against a baseline of random interactions to figure out if a mob is organic or secretly coordinated.
Okay, part 5. Real-world case studies. Let's see this algorithm in action.
When researchers unleashed this on the 2019 Indian elections, they found that one massive narrative held 53% of the total tweet share, and it was driven heavily by public opinion companies and news channels who were essentially structuring the entire debate.
In the discourse surrounding Kashmir Operation 370, the model mapped out 5 distinct narratives, and it mathematically visualized heavy negative polarity, essentially plotting the intense disaffinity that was driving the conflict online.
Then, looking at the Me Too movement, the data showed almost total structural isolation. There were 2 massive, heavily opposed narratives with absolutely zero positive crossover interaction between them. But you want to know what's truly staggering? Across all of these highly charged global events, over 70% of social media users were mathematically proven to participate in only one single narrative echo chamber. Just one.
It really makes you think. We aren't just individuals posting our thoughts. We are data points in a much larger cognitive network. So the next time you share an opinion online, you really have to ask yourself, are you shaping the discourse,
Or are you just playing a predetermined role in someone else's invisible story? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. See you next time.